The clearer we can get on those aspects, those core aspects of who we are as a business, then we can take the next step in terms of getting clear about who our audience is. And then when we understand here's who we are, here's our audience. Okay, the stories are the connecting bridge. And then obviously this way and mode in which the stories are told are across those different marketing activations. And so the integration of the EQ and the IQ here, looking at the data, what is the data telling us with the IQ, being able to derive stories from the data itself, and then thus be able to turn those stories into actionable EQ driven stories as well. So it's really this kind of, if you think of it kind of as a cyclical motion.
Hey everyone, my name's JB and welcome back to our high-level spotlight sessions where we bring in high-level community members who are experts in what they do every day for their business and they want to share their stories to help others grow their business as well. Today we're diving into a game-changing topic for business growth, and we're talking about integrating emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence into the way we do business, whether you are an affiliate, whether you are gray labeling or white labeling high level. We're calling this episode the forgotten ingredient to human connections because it blends empathy with expertise, which is a powerful combination that can set you apart with those that are looking to bring on new customers and grow their business and help others as well. Today, joining me is Christene Marie, a high-level user and the founder of the Knowing Agency. She helps organizations and executives create genuine brands and build real connections with their audience at every stage of the marketing journey. Christene takes on these big ideas around emotional intelligence and makes them practical by showing how they can boost profits and improve relationships. As an international speaker, actress, and author, she blends sharp analysis with deep understanding of people to uncover the truths that lead to real lasting change. For those new to your work, Christene, I want to say welcome, but more importantly, can you tell us a little bit about your background and let us know who you are if we don't know you yet?
Yes, I love the subject of this conversation, so I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, John. My name is Christene Marie. As you so eloquently introduced me, I started my agency in 2019, and it was a little bit on a whim. I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, why am I giving all of my money away in taxes? And why am I building the businesses of all these people around me rather than building something for myself? And so I was actually 26 years old at the time, and I was like, I'm just going to go for it. No one around me. I was not in the digital marketing world. It was very much so a little bit of a scary step into the unknown. And I had my business for about 2 years when my life fell apart. And in my life falling apart, I mean that my husband, who I'd been married to for 8.5 years, ended up leaving. And it just, your future kind of gets ripped out from underneath you. And all of a sudden, someone I was talking to likened it to, you have a rug. All these pieces have been situated on top. You've got your couch, you've got your coffee table, everything's so well organized. And then the rug gets ripped out and everything's floating. And what that did, Don, was that it forced me to look inside for the first time in my life. I had operated so much looking around to everyone around me. I think of it as kind of horizontally aligned, looking east and west and right and left, rather than functioning from this place of being vertically aligned and living in alignment with who I actually was, the truth at my core. And consequently, I became aware of my emotions for the first time and started becoming intelligent as to my emotions. And that has radically changed not only me, but it's translated entirely into the way we do business. No longer is just our left brain activated. Now our right brain is too. And that's how we have to function as human beings. That's why it's called the right brain and left brain. It's meant to be a holistic integration, but so much of the time we're just looking at the numbers. We're just looking at the analytics of the thing, whether it's an activation that you launched, a Google, even traditional media, looking at what are the impressions there, what's the cost per impression versus other activations in the digital landscape. And so that change in me waking up that actually not only brought clarity to who I am on a personal level, but also it clarified my why because I got to know who I am and thus I could lead my team at a much more robust level because I knew my purpose. And so this whole concept of emotional intelligence is so critical, again, not just on the professional side, but also on the personal and vice versa. And so I'm thrilled that we're talking about this because so few people will touch on this topic because it is personal and it's highly professional and we have to be leading with empathy. The definition of emotional intelligence actually incorporates the word empathy in its very definition. It's kind of a two-pronged approach, the definition of emotional intelligence. It is first the ability to understand, be aware of, and thus convey one's own personal emotions. And it's the ability to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously with wisdom and with empathy. And so, in order for us to have a human to human connection, which is the subject of today's conversation, the forgotten ingredient, it is emotional intelligence. So often, again, we're operating out of that left brain and we forget about the empathy piece. And so, when it comes to human connection, person to person, which is everyone that we're selling to, we have to be able to connect on a personal level. Harvard found that 95% of purchase making decisions takes place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions live.
Yeah.
We pretend like it's a logical reason that we made the purchase, but really it all comes back to that interpersonal connection that at the very heart of it is empathy, and you have to be emotionally intelligent in order to employ that.
And this is so much to unpack here. And for those that are just tuning in right now, we are streaming live on our social channel. So if you'd like to comment below, ask questions, join the conversation, please do so, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. But for those that are just popping in right now, we have a handful of people just joining in. Our episode today is called The Forgotten Ingredient to Human Connection. And we're going to go over three important bullet points to keep this conversation on your roadmap. And then you get to figure out what journey you take within it. And the first one that we'll discuss is why EQ, emotional intelligence, and IQ, intellectual intelligence, matter for business growth within your high level business, whether it's gray labeled or white labeled. And Christine will dig deep into that empathy and expertise combination. And then we're going to touch on bullet point number two, which is the practical application of this EQ, IQ in client communications. So that way, by the time we leave this conversation here, you could take some action and start to look at your marketing material and how you communicate with your clients and make those pivotal adjustments as needed. And then the third is using EQ and IQ to upsell and drive client success. I mean, how do we position everything we've learned to give our customers a better understanding of us and us understand them to give them the right offer and the right services they need to grow their business? So with all of that mentioned, I hope you're ready to really take on this challenge of information that's going to be thrown at you. And we hope that you grab one or two nuggets and share below in the comments what you end up taking from it and what your next two steps are going to be with it. So, Christine, if you're okay with it, I'd love for you, if you'd be okay with it, kicking us off with why integrating EQ and IQ is so crucial for business growth, and then kind of unpack that as we evolve in this conversation.
Yes, well, the very first and kind of most basic way in which it's critical for business growth is coming back to the why of the heartbeat of the brand and knowing why you're moving forward. So the mission, the values, if you think of it kind of your why is the propelling agent. Your values are the guardrails moving you forward. And then at the end, think of it as a bowling alley. The outcome is the pins. And so the mission and the why and the values are really propelling businesses forward. And so the more clarity you have surrounding your why, the more you're able to lead not only your team, but also your clients forward and thus also be able to attract. So when we think about storytelling, we talked about this a little bit before we got started. The more we are able to have stories articulated to our why, personal stories, business stories that have an emotional component, the more we're able to connect on that personal level, which informs business decisions, and then be able to move people through the customer journey. So if you're thinking about kind of that customer roadmap, and obviously growth depends on your industry, but typically it's sales and scalability, right? I will say the main metric you should be looking at, folks, is not just gross profits, but your net. So just putting that out there, people have to remember that it's when we think of growth, be aware of what and how you define growth, because apart from clarity around that, you're going to be chasing a whole bunch of different metrics and potentially vanity metrics, such as gross versus net, which is really truly what we want as a business. And so with that, with the purpose of growth as a business, the clearer we can get on those aspects, those core aspects of who we are as a business, then we can take the next step in terms of getting clear about who our audience is. And then when we understand here's who we are, here's our audience. Okay, the stories are the connecting bridge. And then obviously this way and mode in which the stories are told are across those different marketing activations. And so the integration of the EQ and the IQ here, looking at the data, what is the data telling us with the IQ, being able to derive stories from the data itself, and then thus be able to turn those stories into actionable EQ-driven stories as well. So it's really this kind of, if you think of it kind of as a cyclical motion, we're telling the stories. We have to be the first prompt, right? We tell the stories predicated on who we are based on our why and our values and our mission. And then we assess it with the IQ. What stories are really resonating with people? What part of the video do they stop watching? Really looking at the real data numbers, and then adjusting our stories and then telling new ones and or continuing old ones. A lot of times, I will say this, I was speaking at Digital Marketer I guess it was a couple months ago, and we were talking about how critical story is. And so often we get used to our own voice, we get used to our own brand, and we forget that there's new followers every day. There's new customers every day. And they don't know our story. And even the ones who knew it a year ago, well, let's be real, they have so much copious amounts of information thrown at them every single day. And so when we think about those core stories that are in the fabric of who we are as a brand, using them and employing them with the emotional component and really leveraging that to thus be able to move the emotional connection and needle to thus move them through the customer journey and close on conversion. And one last thing on this point, so often we forget about the very bottom of the funnel. I was on a consulting call the other day discussing getting really customized gift boxes for one of our clients for them to distribute to folks. And gifting is one of those things that we forget about, but it's really about nurturing the bottom of funnel. And it really is about turning our best customers into our greatest marketers. And they're the cheapest after all. So really, what are you doing after someone does the converting action? And how are you nurturing them and continuing to teach them about your services? So often when people come in through the initial top of funnel, they don't actually have full visibility into all of your service offerings. And so how are you continuing to educate your current customer list by way of Go High Level? The email is one of my favorite aspects of Go High Level right now. We're using it every single day for our customers and for ourselves as an agency. And really being able to tell those stories effectively, nurture every single part of the customer journey, but especially the bottom of funnel, and really think about how can we personalize those gifts so that the individual feels seen, heard, known, loved. Obviously, if you've got a high ticket offer and these customers are paying $20, $50, $100,000, there's different tiers of personalization in terms of how you show up, both on the email side, social side, but then also kind of the personalization of the gift itself.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, giving a handful of different examples and levels to how in depth you go and what's expected of for someone that's tuning in right now and that they're new to this whole concept of incorporating EQ IQ. Where would you recommend they start their journey?
I love that question. We use the Enneagram, which is a personality test, and it's very, very simple. And actually, that was kind of my first step. I learned about the Enneagram the first year that I started my business, but it was really only after I started to do my own work that I started incorporating it into the business, and that changed everything. It really impacted the way we wrote our copy. It impacted the way I engaged with my clients. To be honest with you, being able to understand the personality and the core motivation. So the Enneagram it's a set of between 1 and 9 different types of personalities. And there's, some supporting layers that go deeper than that. But really it helps me better understand the core motivation. That's really what the Enneagram focuses on. Because if I can understand the core motivation, well, that's what I can speak to. We talk about the pain point of the customer, but what's their core motivation? What do they want? Rather than let's enact fear and prey on their fear, let's prey on what they want. Because so many people, it's like, oh my gosh, that's emotional, right? As well as the pain. So there's a time and place for both. However, I would really encourage folks as they're getting kind of started on the EQ journey, just take your own personality test. Do you even know yourself that well? Because again, harkening back to the definition of emotional intelligence, it starts with you. It starts with you being able to understand, be aware of, and express your own emotions, and then handle interpersonal relationships with wisdom and with empathy.
Yeah, and as I'm starting to think about this and really trying to put myself as an audience member here and a student, I'm trying to
Mm,
think if I have 5 clients or 500 clients, first thing that comes to my mind is where do I have information about my clients? Are we
yes,
building client profiles? Are we asking the right questions?
yes.
Could you help us kind of create a vision that we can have a clear understanding of where do we start with building these client profiles and how personal or how vulnerable could we expect our customers to get with us while we're
Right.
trying to build this right understanding?
Yeah, that's what a good question, John. I love that. Like, what's the expectation for them in return? Gosh, it depends so much on your brand, I would say, and the existing relationship. So let's say you're starting with kind of a neutral position. One, when it comes to, you said ask questions. We always do this whenever we start with a client. We always send a customer survey to their entire list, so long as they let us. And we come back with really interesting insights because we actually find a big disconnect between the customer and their opinion and the company because they haven't done the work to know the customer on that kind of emotional level. And so some of I think to your point of just asking questions, doing a survey, it's really, really easy. And I will say it is nice kind of coming from a third party if you really want it, and it depends on the intent. If the intent is to understand how they view you, that's obviously very different than purely we want to get to know you, right? That's a very different approach. But the way that we've gone about it is, hey, what's your opinion on this company over here? How do you feel about Go High Level? And then we actually ask those kind of feeling based questions, but we lace it in with very practical questions as well. We ask about some demographic questions just so we can kind of segment them. But really, we say, how did you feel when you made that before making that purchase, and how did you feel after making that purchase? Because we want to understand the emotional transformation, because that's what people buy. They buy what they want on an emotional level according to Harvard, and I don't argue with Harvard. And so the more we can understand the emotional state of where someone begins and where someone ends, and hopefully continues on in working with us or our customer, that's so critical because then we can use that data from the customer and use it in our selling. One thing that I do think is really, really important when we think about ourselves in terms of not just on the audience side and understanding them. So understanding them, Go High Level has an incredible survey tool. That's the only one we use. It's really, really simple. And one thing that I really, really like, so this is an option that you can turn on or off, but it shows the how far along in the survey you are, just like a little bar. And that's really helpful because it sets the expectation for customers to understand, man, is this going to be a 30-minute survey or a 2-minute survey? So we actually go through the process of taking the survey and we time ourselves. And then it shows the bar. So we set the expectation, this is the 2-minute survey. And then I would say, why? Why should they take it? And so really, again, setting the expectation because a good brand always sets the emotional expectation for the experience that they're going to have. So we have to set the expectation for the emotional experience they're going to have. That's what a strong brand does. And so the more you can articulate to your customer the why and the expectation for this survey, the better. But that visual component that DHL has in the survey tool is really, really, really nice. So I love that, and I would highly recommend for folks who are going to take the time to really get to know their current customer base. That's really important. But one thing I was going to say is I was on a mastermind call the other week talking to a mastermind, and it was actually kind of early entrepreneurs, only, within the, 1 to 5 years. And I had each one go through and tell me what is the number one thing that differentiates you from everyone else. And it was interesting. It took a little while. It was round robin, and people were a bit reticent to share. And finally, we went through everyone. And at the conclusion, I said, now I want you to go to your website, go to your social media, and where do you see that one thing show up? No one could find it anywhere. And so I would ask, in addition to us asking our customers, how do you feel about us? How are you? We want to know you. Do a hard look at yourself. Are you even showing up in the way you think you might be? Because it's so obvious. Again, it's those stories that we've told over and over and over again that they feel laborious to us, but maybe we're actually not doing as good of a job conveying it as we think. So a brand audit is incredibly important. Again, that both that part of the EQ is personal responsibility over yourself, and then also the empathy with which you exhibit and give to your customers.
And I appreciate you just really giving us that practical portion of it. So it's one thing to understand, like you mentioned, the why and the importance of it, but like the tool is within their platform already that they could use,
Yes.
whether it's for
Oh my
them,
God.
for their business, or for their customers and their customers of theirs.
Yes.
Could you unpack a little bit here how somebody can use that tool and really what KPIs should they be aware of, or at the very least, look out for? What metrics should they look out for when getting these responses back? Um, and even, how do you go about maybe grading or sorting these
Right.
responses to take appropriate action?
Right. It really, again, I don't want to be black and white here. So guys, take this and frame it for your business, right? Some of you may be a shop of five, some of you may be a shop of 500, some of you may be a shop of one. So I recognize that. I really, so one, the best way to form your questions are in the drop down, a grading scale. Avoid as much as you can fill in the blank, because that's where it gets incredibly hard to quantify if you do have a big list that you're emailing it out to. So you really do want to keep your questions. I like to keep it under 10. And then what I've done in the past is we create two lists and two surveys. We have one survey that's like to our dream customers, top 10, top 15 of our clients. And then it's probably maybe between 10 to 15, maybe 20 people, and we ask them more questions because they're our preferred customers. They've been loyal, they've shown up, we know, and they know us, right? We've got a relationship already, so we can ask more of them because we've given them so much. Never request more than you're giving. And with that, and to that point, we have a second list that's more broad and more general, and we limit it to no more than 10 questions that we ever ask. And there's maybe one fill in the blank answer. But again, it depends on the size of your list and depends on the size of you and your team and how many of you actually can take it and filter through. I will say we've used ChatGPT to filter some of those fill in the blank answers, and it will create little bubbles for us to be able to pull out the themes and be able to thus very easily analyze, okay, like these are the top 5 out of all of the responses that we're consistently getting these kind of responses. So use other, do you guys have an AI tool? I can't remember.
Yeah, we've added a whole bunch of different features on there, and we integrate with the AI. So people, and this is going to probably lead into what we're going to talk about next here, which is incorporating the workflows and
Yes.
the processes to infuse the emotional intelligence and the intellectual intelligence in the day-to-day communications, whether it's with leads, customers, or like you said,
Good.
VIP customers. But to answer your questions, yes. And I'm glad you brought it up because a lot of people, they believe that it takes away the genuineness away from using AI.
Yeah.
What is your opinion with leveraging AI to form an emotional connection, not just off of you being you, but being able to attract the masses or interact with the
Yes.
masses So it doesn't look like you're talking to one type of person or one person in one part of their journey.
And isn't that the beauty of AI is that you can, it gives you the power to customize when you are small. And even when you're a large shop, it still gives you the opportunity to serve more. And so I think that the again, coming back to the reason of why, looking at the AI tool and being like, okay, why am I using this? Is it to maximize my ability to serve, or is it to get out of jail scot-free because I don't have to do as much work now? That they're very different reasons for using, very evidently so. And that's where I think if your heart is really genuinely to serve and show up as you, I think that I don't think that there's much harm that it could do if you have a watchful eye over AI. So the way we're using it right now is being so intentional with the inputs and training the chatbot to know. So we've got different chatbots for different brands that we monitor and even for our own, so that it's been so well cultivated and so well learned surrounding each one of these. And we use the organic content from history. We all have copious organic content, right? And so we use our organic our organic voice to train the AI to sound like us. And you can do it multiple ways, right? You can literally train it to just sound like you and then have a really solid prompt to kind of course correct. Okay, we want to create this one basic template. Let's edit that, make it perfect. And then let's go ahead and put this in and tell them about the different segments of our audience and then customize it to each segment. So once you have kind of that parent page or that parent copy, that's when you can really go to town with the personalization of it and really get hyper focused on serving those different audiences. Because one of the things with the email copy that's really beautiful with high level is the segmentation capability. And you can have so many lists with so many different types of tags that you can send it for different services, different regions, different age groups. You know, you can get so hyper focused, and then being able to tailor your copy so that people feel, and again, that emotional connection. And the reason why, y'all, it's so critical that we do the work first of that definition of EQ, us being able to present ourselves authentically, is because apart from authenticity, emotion and empathy becomes manipulation. So we have to lead with the truth of who we are before we can ask them that of themselves, right? We can't expect them to come to us and trust us and put their dollars in our pockets with a good conscience. Otherwise, it is manipulation, right? So we have to be doing the work to present ourselves authentically, and it requires us doing the work first to know ourselves, and then we can show up as the strong, integrous brand that each one of us is. And so with that, in terms of developing those email segmentations, incorporating as many tags as you can and doing the work to assign those. And that's one of the things that we've done too, is actually putting our email list into an AI tool to help us uncover additional segments that we haven't thought of. That's one of the things about AI, is that it's smarter than us, unfortunately. However, it's really got the IQ and it can use the help with the EQ. And so that's really where we can play a part, is the human to human connection that we bring. One thing that's interesting, and then I'll pass it back over to you, John, is that when we think about each one of our brands, what makes our brand proprietary and different is our unique story. And I mean truly experiential story. And so no AI has that, right? If they're going to try to write a brand script for another company and they're not giving it a prompt that has any kind of emotion in it, you will always shine because yours is tied to something real and tangible that a human being relates to. So get really clear on who you are, and be sure to do that work, and then also do the work to get to know your customer.
Wow. And I think that's, subconsciously, like maybe the audience is with me here. Like I feel like I know this, but
Yeah.
there's other things that take control over my brain in my
Mm,
day to day that it's one of those things I just put it to the side and
yeah.
focus on what I believe, in my opinion, is higher priority items.
Yeah.
And then now that I look back, I've been neglecting a few of these things more and more frequently, that it comes out
Mhm.
of sight, out of mind. So I
Yes.
appreciate you bringing this from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And
Mm.
now, um, you've mentioned some examples, and you've mentioned, your use of high level and some of the features. I don't want to get too much into the features per se of how you use it, but I'm interested in, your opinion and the strategy that you'd recommend when we break down three important parts where I believe if someone that's tuning in that they're an agency or a software as a subscription, software as a service, software with professional services attached to it, their customers are communicating with them in one of these three ways, whether it's SMS, social media messaging, whether it's groups, one-to-one messaging, or in the comments, and then
Hmm.
email. So if you're okay with me unpacking this with you here, I'd love to know your opinion and how you take control incorporating EQ and IQ to SMS, something where it's 160 characters or less. You're charged per the character. It can come off way too overwhelming or way too disrespectful if you just ask too much or throw too much at once. How do we balance this form of communication for it
Right.
to help us, but also our customers or prospects?
Mm. I love that. I want to get to that. I just want to say one thing. If you've done a good job setting the expectation for the experience that they're going to have, you have so much freedom to show up in alignment with your brand, and you don't have to worry about the nuances of, oh, well, I want to tiptoe and be careful. Y'all, strong brands demarcate. People love Starbucks and they hate Starbucks. And you want that. So don't be afraid of that. And I think that frankly, that's something I've really had to grow in. I had to be willing to be a demarcating person if I want to show up and stand out and live in accordance with who I was created to be in the first place, right? Again, it's authenticity, not pretending. It's empathy, not manipulation. It's there's always a shadow to the things that we're talking about. And so I just want to bring that forward that it really is, don't be afraid, but do the work to check your social profiles, your website, the way you've positioned yourself. Are you actually setting the expectation for the experience they will eventually have? Whether it's at the very bottom of the funnel, whether it's mid funnel, it doesn't matter. Are you setting an accurate expectation? Because then, to that point of having that emotional connection, do your emotions, or I'm sorry, do your SMSs sound like you? And you, I mean the proverbial you, right? It could be your proprietary brand or it could be the brand. But the strongest brands, guys, at the Go High Level Summit, they had y'all's little icon running around like in a costume. Like that's a strong brand. I have heard raving reviews. I wasn't able to make it last minute, which was so sad, but people adored Go High Level Summit, and it's because the brand is so strong. You know exactly what to expect. And it's not just the visuals, but it's every single moment of the experience is so on brand. And so when it comes to the messaging itself, I mean, I really now this is me personally, right? I have an emoji that I usually use. It's a little sparkle emoji. And so I kind of have assigned that to my brand. So I'm consistent in using that. I also like using a nice, healthy mix of exclamation points and periods because it's really hard to get tone online and over digital communication. So don't be afraid. You know, if you and your brand is kind of fun and loud and rambunctious, don't be afraid of putting in two or three exclamation points. I again, it's not about oh, what's the customer going to think. It's okay, well, who am I? And lead with that.
And the way the way you answered that question was essentially for those that didn't realize that we might be looking in the wrong place first. You nicely unpacked it where it said, don't worry about the message you're about to send, worry about the first impression you made. Worry
Mm,
about if somebody were to look you up, what are they seeing about you to then fill in the gap of where they may not be understanding where you're coming from.
yes.
And
That's
and and the way that you put that, bells started going off because sometimes, I've seen in my personal interactions as well as working and talking with high level users of all different levels. We're so quick. Some of us are so quick to focus on just getting the message out, hitting the market. Others
mm,
are overthink the messaging and the approach, and others don't even do any messaging or any outreach. They just kind of keep it grassroots, whether it's in person or by phone, things like that.
right.
So there's so much being left on the table if you don't look at your why, and then you don't look at what people that know you or don't know you find about you first, and then taking all of that and then just doing a nice presentation of consistency. So, like you said, the
Mhm.
sparkle emoji, You're known for a couple period, 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 and a couple exclamation points. So you hit on the dot. It is hard to get tone. It is hard to get context. And that was a great, I appreciate you unpacking this practical application of it because that's what sometimes is the hardest part is, all right, how do I
Mhm.
use this for me?
Yes.
So
Yes.
as we evolve on that now, we take this text messaging, which is very personal,
Mm,
whether it's, application to person or it's someone's green to blue or blue to blue or green to green. However you identify it, it's someone's two thumbs touching that keyboard or that phone. There is thought and emotion and intellectual things happening. People can
right.
get offended really quick or shut down or even get yourself in trouble by
Yeah.
how it's persuaded. What are what are like the three or four golden rules that you kind of check up from the neck up before you hit send or before you put something in rotation?
What a good, I love that. Check up from the neck up. That's so cute. John, I always ask myself this question, and I'm gonna circle back with my team and ask them, what are your 3 to 4 rules? They all pretty much know what our standards are as an agency, which very much so. Well, it's emotional intelligence is one of our values, and excellence is another, and there's a few others. But um, for me personally, I always ask, well, what would I want? How would I want to experience this? Because again, from that human to human connection, that's so important. Or I put the audience avatar and I've actually named them. I visualize them in my mind. And I'm like, man, if I was Seth, how would I want this? How would Seth feel when he received this? And it's really putting yourself, and this is what empathy is. It's the ability to put yourself in another's shoes and in another's position and sit on the same bench as them, looking out at the experience of their life. And so that is the power of empathy is sitting alongside someone and then incorporating that empathetic practice into whatever outcome or output. That's so helpful. Just how would they feel receiving this? How would they feel seeing this? And it is a very much so kind of walking that narrow line hand in hand, the authenticity and the empathy, because you want to be proactive, leading by way of who I am, and reactive. How are people responding? What's being said. I don't want to, that's not my heart to offend, right? And so that's where I actually really love the word in the emotional intelligence definition on that second half with empathy and judiciously. So with wisdom and with empathy. So it's not just we're abandoning ourselves. We live in a culture of codependent recovering codependents, right? Who had no idea who they were. And then we also have existed in a culture where there's a lot of a lack of wisdom. And there's just a lot of feeling and a lot of emotion circulating, but it's not very grounded in wisdom. And so that's where the integration of the EQ and the IQ is so brilliant because you're able to dance that fine line of, okay, putting the thumb on the pulse, the gas and the brakes, and just really see how things are landing. Because I've done this once before. I posted something that frankly, it was really encouraging to me. And someone messaged me back and I was like, oh wow, like what an interesting perspective. Thank you. I'm gonna just delete that just to be safe. That was not my heart. But I think that that's where it's important, guys, if you do send out that survey and you have a few people who really aren't happy, pick up the phone and call them. Like actually call, which is a mind-blowing concept for this generation with how much we sit and kind of hide a little bit behind our computers and phones. But that action of taking the initiative and calling them, it means more to people than we can ever realize. Or a voice note. That's another powerful thing with SMS is that you can send voice notes. So I would say get as personal as you possibly can and really listen. So when you talk about KPIs in terms of the email sends, really pay attention to what the social monitoring. That's going to be really, really important in this whole exercise of showing up authentically and kind of seeing the feedback. See what people are talking about in response and pay attention because that really, really matters.
And last part that I believe this will bring us to our next final topic point here. is social media, the story you share on social media, um, the tonality used on social media. I know we covered SMS and email, and both of them are very personal. And I know they all kind of all share different components and best practices. Is there anything that social media has unique to it that we should be aware of when incorporating EQ, IQ, and just the overall concept of empathy, emotion, and the judicious approach to
Yeah.
things?
Yeah. One thing about social that email does not have and SMS does not have is now you've got a whole world of other people's networks. So the more time you take to actually comment on other people in your industry, their content, who their audience is your audience, the more you can actually show up on those feeds. One thing that I love about LinkedIn, if you post on someone else's post, well, and then someone else posts. So if I post on your LinkedIn post, John, and then, but before I did, Lauren posts, well, then I post, Lauren gets an email that I posted. And then Lauren gets an email for every single person who posts on that same post following her post or comment. So, or her comment. So there's a huge opportunity to leverage other people's networks. That's really, really brilliant about social media platforms. And that's one of the best ways to increase visibility, especially on Instagram. It's a hard place to exist right now. The algorithm's been changing and the content, now you can have 10-minute videos on there and what are you, TikTok or what's happening? And so there's a lot of change on the social media side, but the more that you're showing up, not only for you personally, but also showing up to serve and commenting and supporting what even maybe some good points that your competitor is making. Like, let's be humble here because there's enough to go around. And so when we operate from an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset, then we can show up and serve and really strengthen our presence. Now we have permission to show up in more places because we're not a threat anymore. So now we can show up in all these different spaces where maybe they actually have a greater following than I do, but it's okay. You do this one aspect of the business, I do this one. No competition. And so I think that's, if I was to say one thing, it's pay attention to how you're leveraging the networks of other brands.
That's a whole other masterclass in itself.
I
I mean,
know, but we'll get to
you
that
know,
later.
this is something that like it's there and we all
Mm,
know it. And if you have this aha moment that I just had, let me know in the comments below. But the concept of, you know, responding back and having conversations on comments, and then depending on their notification settings, they're getting notified. Like I see it on my Slack, I see it on my Facebook, my Instagram, and I will click. And if a name catches me or a profile picture catches me, I will click. I will go like 4 clicks in.
yes.
And I know I'm not the only one because you just went in depth on it. But again, it's all about how the empathy, the emotional part of it, the intellectual side of it, the business side of it, the end result goal side of it, the collaboration mindset. We kind
Yes.
of touched on this with like scarcity and a little bit of like, in competition mode all the time. But if you have this open mind that if I can
Mhm.
comment on all my competitors and I can find other thought leaders within the industry, I can
Yes.
actually play nice in the same sandbox. And
Mm.
maybe they don't handle or do a service that I have, and they'll refer out to me. And we have like this, pack of, this is what we specialize in, but we know you're great at that. I've
Mm.
also seen it where people that have sold their agencies have sold them or they've started consulting gigs from other people in larger, bigger companies in their same industry, tap them on the shoulder because from a distance they were watching their
Yeah.
success.
Mm. That's so good.
And I'm
That's
thinking, and I'm thinking here, is this common sense or is there a book on this? Like, if we weren't talking about this, Christine, like, how would somebody find this out?
Well, on the business side, I haven't I haven't written a book about this particular subject. I've written a book on knowing self and my journey there. In terms of how to figure it out, John, I gotta say, I think it's paying attention to your own habits and behaviors. And people act like we do. And we think of everyone else on these grand pedestals. Look how great their lives are. Look at how wonderful though their weekend was compared to my boring weekend. Well, we all know about the highlight reel story, right? We all know that we're seeing their highlight reels. But the reality is that if we were to truly take an analysis of ourselves, an analysis of our brand, we recognize that actually we're all the same. And what a beautiful thing that is. What a beautiful, beautiful thing that is, because now we can connect. Otherwise, it's us versus them, right? So the moment we see and allow ourselves to be playing in the same sandbox, now we can actually interact in a way that is very, very genuine because competition has been eliminated and otherness has been eliminated. So the more that we can bring that into the way we do business, the way we show up online, that it's not, and John, I wrestle with this every day. You know, this isn't something that you conquer and you're one and done. You're scot free. We're good. But it really is an ongoing practice and cultivation of our mindset and general approach to business, to relationships, to ourselves, because we are not disparate. Ourselves is not disparate from our businesses and our relationships. So how we view ourselves is ultimately how we view ourselves in business as well. It's all going to touch each other. That's why the analysis of self, both as a brand and as the individual, is so critical so that we are not ostracizing ourselves. They're not doing it, we are. And so taking radical accountability and responsibility for how we show up every day and what our mindsets are in everything we do, we can learn a lot in terms of just human behavior that propels the connection that we all want connection. That is at the ethos and at the core of the human race. And so the more we can tap into what do I want? That was something I didn't know 5 years ago, 3 years ago. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know, I didn't think I needed anyone, anything. I was good. But the more I got to know myself and became awake to my own needs, wants, emotions, now I could connect with other people on a much deeper level in business or otherwise.
And I see this, in social media groups, there's groups of 5,000, 50,000 plus members, and there's always a select small group of people that are always engaging and talking. And even like in our high level community, in our other communities that we have, there's a handful of people that put this, us versus them, or I do
Yes.
it better, or they'll have different opinions, and sometimes they collaborate, sometimes they collide, sometimes they have a conversation. It
Yeah.
could be any of the three at any moment, and a combination of them at any time as well. And I also see that in settings where people are going to Chamber of Commerce events or conferences, or
Mm.
or just out and about in a small group somewhere. There's a handful of people that know how to maintain a conversation, and those that ignore the EQ IQ of the conversation, and then it derails everything.
I
So this
know.
isn't this isn't unique to just software and sales and our little world that we're in as entrepreneurs here. It's everything to do with human to human. And
Yes.
and I was thinking, how did I learn some of this stuff before? I'm like, I would go to Barnes and Nobles, and I go to a business section, and I go to the table of contents, and I look at topics, and those topics would fuel interest. And then I look at the back of the book and read the back, summary. And then I would kind of figure it out from there. But
Mm.
today, more than ever, we have the power of what we're doing now,
Yes.
speaking publicly,
Yes.
sharing stories, and also identifying nuggets that are important to us, but also maybe important to others in what we share in
Mm.
commonality. So, with that being said, how do we take everything we've learned so far from the
Mm.
foundation of why emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence can help business growth,
Mm.
to examples how we practically apply it in our business communications, to now taking this to the next level of strategically putting together strategies to take our maybe entry level clients into higher ticket,
Yeah.
higher quality services, but also how to improve and accelerate the way we communicate our client success, our the true two-way communication where we're connected between our team and the client, but we're as one together.
I love that. Well, I would start out with doing that survey. If you haven't done a good thumb on the pulse of who your clients are and what do they have to tell you, what do they have to tell you to inform the new content offers you're going to create? Because what are they missing in their current experience? And so the best way, when we send out the survey, in addition to having those two different groups, we also call a handful of people.
If I if I
Yeah,
may interrupt you here, please,
yeah,
because um, here's something I just want to use myself as the example.
yeah.
In this overwhelming world of more information, more tactics, cheat codes, secret codes, you've stayed consistent with survey.
Hmm.
There's no like the survey has been your go-to.
Yeah.
For someone like myself who's expecting maybe another cheat code or another faster way or an easier way, could you help address that to myself on behalf of others?
Yes.
Like this is the survey maybe I'm just not seeing it the same way, but
Yeah.
why is that survey like why do you like stay on that survey? That is that the final answer, right? Like
Well, so what's the purpose? What's the why? Are you trying to better understand your customer? Because if you are, I was just saying that you can call them too. I actually we incorporate that into our practice. Guys, if you have the time to call every single person on your email list, do it. We typically call the top performing clients. The reason why I love a survey is because it's quantifiable and it also allows for the ability to ask those emotion driven questions. And
but
so,
it's not complicated enough, Christine. Like shouldn't it be more complicated? Shouldn't it be a little bit more in depth? Like it
right,
sounds
it's too easy. And so we don't do it. John, we don't do that which is easy, that which we know, because everyone else is doing it. And again, we ostracize ourselves. So we want to be unique. We want to be special. We're not like them. And also, look how fancy and wonderful they are. They're on a pedestal while I'm down here. It's very interesting the way the human mind works. And usually we kind of land on one side or the other where we really want to be unique. And also, we're highly lonely and feeling like we're not good enough at our core. And so if we were to take off that lens and really think what would actually serve them, well, a 2 minute survey or them coming out of the thing with social media that we have to be so careful about is that they are on there for a very intentional purpose. Now, if you can do a LinkedIn survey, that's or a questionnaire or something where like post it on LinkedIn and see if people comment and engage, that's always ideal. We want the hundreds of comments. But on every other social media channel, they're there for a very specific experience. And I don't know about you, but I scroll. I'm not really actually stopping and commenting and engaging, right? There are some people that's a very specific type of person that takes their time to engage in comments. I still think it's important on the business side for the purpose of those special, unique people who do engage in comments, but most of us are scrolling. TikTok has forever ruined us. We've got less attention span than a fish. I'm not kidding you. It's less attention than that, and I think it's 8 seconds, maybe less. The reason why I love email is because this is your list. You've cultivated the relationship. They know you, they trust you. And it's a really beautiful opportunity to position it. If this works with your audience and the relationship you have, tell them, I really actually want to get to know you more. Include a video in it. And I've done that. I've sent myself on behalf of our clients because again, it's a third party coming in. But we have also equipped our customers to do that, to send a video, to send a personal email, and to say, hey, look, we just want to understand how we're doing and how we can better serve you. It's simple, it's honest, and it's easy. And so don't underestimate that which is easy because ultimately therein lies the answer.
so here's the question. Doesn't that open Pandora's box? Doesn't that put me at risk for churn? Doesn't that give people excuses to complain? Why would I want to do that? What's the benefit?
The benefit is that you hear the truth. So do you want to know the truth? That's probably one of the biggest questions you, as an agency owner, as an entrepreneur, have to ask because you don't have to know the truth. You can continue in kind of the way you've been operating and staying just far away enough that you actually will never know. But if you're brave enough to engage with the truth, a survey is one of the best ways to do that. And if you're brave enough to engage with the truth, you likely will hear it and it may be hard. I will say, out of the so many surveys we've sent, we usually get pretty good feedback. We've come at it from the point of we want to serve you and we want to help you. And there's because we positioned ourselves that way and in humility, they engage in kind. What we put out is usually what we get in return. That's just like a universal law. And so if we're putting out and putting in kind of like if you think about like how many rocks am I putting into the bucket, then okay, now I get this many rocks to pull out, right? So I think it's really important for us to do an analysis before doing a survey like that. But how have you been treating your customers? Do your brand audit first before you go and try to get to know your audience. Do take personal responsibility over your company, over your data, over your brand. How are you showing up into the world? What are your greatest differentiators? Are they listed anywhere prominent? How are you engaging currently in terms of your positioning on that emotional level, on the emotional transformation? How are you making your customer the hero rather than being selfish and promoting you? So do a good hard look first and then go ahead and send out a survey. I know it's not complicated or flashy, and people honestly want complicated and flashy because it feeds ego.
So and again, I'm putting myself, as the example here from just putting myself in past shoes, you
Mm,
know, okay, that's it. Like, but then I gotta ask myself, why didn't I do that sooner?
yeah.
And you answered it when you said, well, you didn't want to know the truth.
Mm,
And now I get to know the truth, and that should tell me some stories based on the KPIs that come in, whether it's good, bad, medium, feedback, whatever the case may be. How does that start to unlock, open up the opportunity to get more revenue in the door,
yes.
to get
Right.
more referrals? How does
Right.
that, where do you see in your past experience that shift happening? Where now
Mm.
we faced the truth, we're making changes, and now this starts to happen.
The referral side, not necessarily new business.
Well, I mean, just referrals and an upsell.
Yeah.
New,
Well,
packages growing bigger because of it. Have you seen
yeah.
that?
I have. Well, you know what I've seen? I've seen that people want to be engaged with the mission. So if you haven't been engaging with your customers at that kind of emotional driven element yet and level, then I would say opening Pandora's box to use your words by sending this survey and then have a plan set up for afterwards. Like this is a little bit of crisis comms 101, right? So for this kind of a response, we've got this messaging prepared. For this kind of response, we've got this prepared and incorporate again. I was talking about having your team ready to call the people who have given you negative feedback. Have gifts. Have a thank you gift for every single person who took the time to do it. Have a handwritten note, and it can be in the hand of your CEO, founder, whoever, and then you can copy it and send. But get personal with it. The goal is personalization for the purpose of saving what could be broken. But y'all, it was broken already. They were gonna leave already. It's not like now we just know, and that's uncomfortable. So once we're brave enough to face the discomfort of the truth, then we can do something about it. So I would say have three different levels planned out with three different action plans. So you want to have the response, you want to have the actual action, and then ideally plan out 6 to 8 weeks of what you're going to do. And then from that place, from the truth that you gained, create create a team that's going to go in and do a deep dive. And they can be the ones that are responding, the ones that are actually taking action to call. But if you've got kind of a customer care team, and then you've got an analysis team to go in to look at the data, and then the analysis team, so long as they have the capacity for analysis and strategic direction, then they create the plan of action. And then, guys, this is the perfect time to do it. It's early November. So if you were to send out a survey next week, that gives you 5 weeks to create an action plan and implement for 2025.
Woo! If you feel the way I feel, let me know below in the comments. Go ahead and share your takeaways on this. Christine, before we wrap up, I mean, this can go so many different directions, and this is definitely a great reason for us to meet back up again here and unpack another important topic that sometimes we put it to the side because it's not directly correlated with money, right? Like, hey, you
Mm,
do this, you get paid for it. This is one of those. It works in the background. It's a
yes,
tool working in the background that keeps the machine rolling.
Yes.
But before we do wrap up, would you like to share any final thoughts or key takeaways that you'd like for someone that just joined in, that didn't get a chance to watch this full episode? They have to hit the replay button at some point here. Perhaps a piece of advice or for something that you believe can enhance their emotional awareness to
Mm.
really hone in on this episode and take a nugget or two to grow their business. Would you mind sharing one or two things?
Yeah. Number one, I really want people to remember without authenticity, empathy becomes manipulation. That is probably one of the most important lessons because all of us are marketers. We're all business owners. We all want something. But if we're not honest about what we want, it's going to turn into something other than connection. And number two, I really want everyone to do an audit of themselves and their business and just take a good hard look. Try to act as a third party of your life. When I was coming out of kind of my place of devastation, I acted as a third party as I moved through the moments of my life. Like it was almost like slow motion. I was in so much pain, and I just watched myself and how I operated, and I was like, why do I think that way? And I just one thing to note too in this audit is to be curious, remove judgment, because y'all, we cannot see clearly. We cannot assess those survey results and the feedback that we're getting from our customers, our dear, precious customers who have given us money. How can we love them and serve them? Well, we can't find out how to do that if we're not willing to withhold judgment and be curious about the results that we're finding. To extend grace and compassion for other team members who had an idea, who, maybe they wanted to test something out and it was a complete flop. That's fine. We're going to keep going. Setting and preparing your own emotional response if it's going to go right or if it's going to go wrong. The more you can do not only that self-audit, but also planning for the future, plan your emotional response for everything that's going to go wrong. What's the very worst thing that can happen? And actually play that out. Play that out in your mind. Create a crisis comms plan for it. Like, what are you going to say? How are you going to act? The goal is that we do not allow our emotions or the data to take us by surprise. So the more we're surprised by what the data is telling us, the more we're surprised by the emotions coming out of us, the more we are not in alignment with EQ or IQ.
Thank you so much. Help me give a warm thank you to Christene here in the comments below. This has been a journey. It's been a journey of just unlocking perspective. And if I'm the only one, that's fine. I'd rather be the only one. But if you've also unlocked a few things on perspective and what you're going to make changes on and what strategies you're going to pivot from, or maybe how you approach clients or potential new business or partner relationships, vendor relationships, affiliate whatever you're doing, everything has a connection to EQ, IQ. Let us know below. This is a whole topic that we need to dive more into as we're evolving in our entrepreneurial journey. Thank you for the insights, Christene. It's been a pleasure having you here on the show today. It's been a pleasure to see the comments, the feedback, just the understanding of your knowing framework and
Yes.
how, these resources, maybe we haven't fully taken advantage of them at wherever everyone's at in their journey. But if you enjoyed today's episode like I did, let me know below in the comments. And most importantly, if you're not a high-level user yet, you're missing out because business women like Christene Marie and many of our other guests are using high level. They're in the mix. They're sharing their 2 cents. They're sharing their strategies. They're unpacking what works for their business, for their clients, for their employees. And you don't want to miss out on that. Christene, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope we get to connect again here. And to our audience, as always, we appreciate the time and commitment you take to learning with us here at High Level. Till the next one, I'll see y'all guys. Take care.